Hi there, that's us live now. So, welcome to this, the third and final live stream event of this run of Caring for Vulnerable Children. My name's Graham McPhee. I guess you know that by now. If you've got to week 6, then you will know who I am. So, my name's Graham McPhee. I'm based at the University of Strathclyde, and I am the lead educator on the Caring for Vulnerable Children programme. I've just had my text from Sarah letting me know that everybody can see and hear me. Good. I've mentioned this before. We would normally do this in the studio. So she'd be sitting across the other side of the room saying, right, give me the thumbs up. All's good. She does it by phone just to make sure that I'm not sitting talking to myself for the next 40 minutes or so. So thanks for that, Sarah. So I'm the lead educator on the course, as you know by now. And if you've been with us so far and you've been part of the live stream events up to now, you'll be pretty familiar with the format of these. We'll take the next kind of 35 or 40 minutes or so, and what I would like to do is answer some of the questions that have been posted, talk about, we've had a couple of polls running in the last week, and we've got the results of those, and there's some interesting stuff in there. We'll talk about that. And I've also just pulled out some beyond the question, just some kind of general comments and talking points that have jumped out at me from the forums over the last couple of weeks, and then just generally kind of wrap everything up. And I mean, it's been another really good and enjoyable run of this program. There's now over 3,500 of you in this run, over 12,000 comments. So again, apologies because we can only pull out a very small amount of those comments and respond to them. But you've still got I mentioned this before, a really high kind of sociability rating. Over 43% of you been active on the boards and commenting and things, which is excellent. We're again kind of a really international cohort. There's 109 countries represented now. Unsurprisingly, just over 3/4 of you from the UK, and I say unsurprisingly because we're a UK university based in Scotland, but it's great that we've got so many people from so many different places. And again, as I said in week 2 and week 4, whilst specific parts of the material, and especially Billy's story, which we're going to talk about today, are obviously have a very Scottish context, suggest that the themes and issues that we're talking about are absolutely global and universal. And I've been encouraging you to think about the issues and topics that we're talking about, for instance, in relation to Billy's story. How do these play out and apply in your setting? Because these are very much kind of universal issues. So in terms of the running order for today, we're going to start with Billy's story. We will move on to, I've had some more just kind of more general questions and comments. I'm going to make a point of responding to them. We will talk about the 2-part poll again. We made a poll over 2 weeks. So it was kind of similar to the ones that you did in week 1 and week 2, where you got a bit of a scenario where you had to pick the 3 that you were most concerned about, and then we gave you some more information and you to kind of remake your choices. And there's been some interesting results there in relation to a couple of those scenarios. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll pull things together. So let's start with Billy's story. So actually, before I go any further, because obviously the way that we set up Billy's story this week, that the episode 6, the last part of the story, didn't become immediately available. We created a poll and asked a question as to, based on this fictional story and the information that you had about what you thought should happen next, and we ran a poll. So we've got the results of that, and Billy's story has now been released in a sense, in terms of it's now visible. So if you're watching the recording of this and you've not already watched Billy's story, you may want to pause this, go to the Billy story page, watch the final episode, and then come back. If not, that's me kind of giving my spoiler alert, because I'm about to talk about kind of what happens in the final episode of Billy's story. So it's just kind of worth flagging that up if you've not looked at it already. And actually, just before I go any further, I can see kind of comments and questions getting posted on the live chat. Again, I've got that. So thanks for doing that. Mary, I can see you've posted a question, and I will come to that. And it's actually to encourage everyone that if you've got any questions and you are watching live, one way to contact with me is to put them into the chat, and I'll respond to them. And actually, if you've got any responses to anything that I'm saying during this session, then please kind of contribute that to the chat and keep the conversation going. And actually, Joanne, I'll respond to your question there about our master's program as well. Sorry, I'm just pausing for 1 second here. I realised I'd left my email running in the background there, and every time I get an email come in, I get a distracting noise, so I'm turning that off so that I don't lose my chain of thought. So Billy's story. So we get at the end of week 5, if you remember, he was at the children's hearing, and kind of it finished where the panel members were about to kind of make their decision and communicate that. And at the end of week 5, we asked you what you thought should happen next, based, and again, I would want to emphasise, based on what is a fictional story, and in reality, I've kind of quite a minimal amount of information for you to make that story, because you're getting 3 or 4 minutes worth of information. So an actual children's hearing with an actual case, obviously panel members would have a whole wealth of information in terms of kind of background reports, more contemporary reports and assessments, and then also the people who are present and engaging with them and having a conversation. So panel members would be basing their decisions on a whole lot more information than we could provide you in the case of Billy's story. But nonetheless, we asked you to vote. The results this time round, because Care for Vulnerable Children has ran many times now, it was fairly typical in that out of everybody that voted, 69% of you thought that Billy should remain at home. 31% of you thought that the better option for him at this point might be a foster care placement. Fairly typical. So sometimes the number want Billy to remain at home can be kind of slightly higher in the 70s, but kind of fairly kind of typical for us. So it's been interesting, I guess interesting to reflect on kind of some of the issues at play here, and actually some of the discussion that's popped up on the board on the back of that, in terms of the 6th episode being available to you, and different comments that are posted. And I've pulled out just kind of 3 or 4 comments, and actually completely by coincidence, I see I've pulled out a couple of, well, at least one comment from somebody who's here, because I see actually 2 of you. I see you commenting in the live stream chat, so that's positively coincidental for me. So I pulled out some comments, because some of them kind of are typical of other comments that we made, but I think there's some interesting bits in it as well. So the first comment I want to highlight was made by Emma Connolly. So Emma, thanks for making your comment. And Emma said that she described herself as extremely happy to see the outcome for Billy, and she I'm using her words here, she strongly believed this was the correct kind of course of action at this point in time. But she said Billy's mum evidently still needs help to allow her to be able to look after herself better, both physically and mentally. And in doing so, the family could hopefully bring more money in, and she'll be in a better position to look after Billy. So that reflected a number of comments that were made by a number of you, kind of saying that I feel happy with the outcome, but I recognise that just that outcome in itself isn't going to solve everything. And in many ways, actually, the title of episode 6 of Billy's story, I don't know if you notice it, is what we've called the ongoing challenges. And that in itself is a recognition that whilst this is the end of the story for Billy in terms of caring for vulnerable children, we've got to week 6 of the programme and we don't go any further. If Billy was a real child and this was a real family, it wouldn't be the end of the story at the children's hearing, because Billy's staying at home, but there's still a whole range of issues, there's still a whole range of support needs Billy's mum's still experiencing a kind of whole range of issues, and this is going to impact on her ability to look after and care for and parent Billy and give him the kind of the care and nurture and containment that we would want all children to receive as they grow and move forward. So there are going to be ongoing challenges. So that comment from Emma, I think, kind of captured kind of something that a number of people were saying, that I think this is the best thing for Billy, but it's got to be staying at home, or if he's going to be staying at home, there's got to be other things put in place in order to make that work and to make that the most effective the most effective outcome for him at this point in time. So saw a number of comments kind of such as that, but then equally saw some other comments from other people kind of saying that I'm not totally convinced that that's the right decision. I guess there's almost two elements that I kind of want to kind of pick up on, because and this came through in a number of comments, because in the commentary for now I can't remember if it's actually week 5 or week 6 of Billy's story, and I should do, but definitely in week 5 or week 6, the commentary makes the comment that the panel members are aware of a shortage of foster carers. They don't. What it doesn't say is that they make their decision because there's a shortage of foster carers. It's just they're aware in the back of their mind there's a shortage of foster carers, and it's interesting that kind of sometimes that gets picked up on a bit more, and it's probably kind of useful me explaining, as a person who wrote Billy's story, me explaining kind of what I'm trying to get at there. And I'm actually, if I reflect on one particular case that sticks in my mind that I was involved in when I was in practice. So before I was at university, I practiced in residential childcare, and one particular young woman that we were involved in working with, who we went to 3 children's hearings, all 3 weeks apart. And we went to the first children's hearing, and this was a young person who was living at that time in a young person centre, so a children's home, as might be used in other language. And there was a huge number of concerns about her, because as a result of various aspects of behaviour, but kind of real concern about our emotional or physical well-being, and repeatedly putting herself or kind of find herself in situations that were really high-end, dangerous, concerning. We had real concerns about her, and the decision of the panel based on those concerns was they renewed her order in terms of being placed in a residential setting, but made the recommendation, or made the order, it should be in a secure setting, and the language at that time being she was placed under a secure order. But the panel making a decision such as that, in terms of that, got to be carried through. Well, there's got to be a bed, there's got to be a vacancy somewhere, and the secure estate at that point was full. There was no placement for her. So we found ourselves back at the hearing again 3 weeks later, and all the same concerns were still there. The panel's re-meeting. The panel members are not happy because 3 weeks ago they've made a secure order. The young person hasn't been placed in a secure placement. None's become available, and actually any placements that have become available, pardon me, somebody else has been placed in it because they've been deemed at more risk and more needed a placement. So she's still not been placed. They renew the secure order. And 3 weeks again, the same thing happens. We're back at the panel again, another 3 weeks down the line. And she's now had 2 3-week secure orders, and she's still no nearer a secure placement. Now, I can't remember exactly how many times we went through that pattern, but she never actually made it to secure, because eventually the panel came to the conclusion the circumstances had started to change kind of fairly significantly, and the assessment was that there was less of a immediate risk and danger, and a secure placement might not be the best option at that point. But one of the things that strikes me on reflection is that every panel that we went to, when the panel members, when they're reading the reports before we get there, and then when actually the panel's playing out and they're charged with making their decision. And again, I'm going to use the same phrase that I just used in relation to Billy's story. At the back of their mind, they are aware of the fact that we've made a secure order before and there's no beds available. Now, what I didn't experience was that them saying, right, we're making this decision because there is a bed or there isn't a bed. We should still be asking them to make a decision based on what do you think is in the best interest of this child at this given time, based on all the evidence you've got, all the assessment. But it must be impossible for them to, we're all human. We know the context within which these events are taking place, and at the back of their mind, they know we've been down this road before. We've already had, depending on what panel it was, we've already had 1 3-week order, or we've already had 2 3-week orders. So those panel members couldn't divorce themselves from that context. And in relation to Billy's story, that what the commentary didn't say was the panel members have made this decision because there is a shortage of foster carers. Okay, what it says is they are aware of the fact that against this backdrop, and in many ways, if any of us pay attention to any of this sort of stuff, it's actually impossible to avoid that context. Certainly in the area where I stay, there is a very public publicity and recruitment campaign because we have a shortage of foster carers, and the local authority and different organisations trying to reach out and trying to encourage people to think about this and raise awareness, and in the hope that we might be able to recruit more people to take on this hugely vital and important role. So it's almost, if you pay attention, it's almost impossible not to have that in the back of your mind, not to have that context. So in relation to Billy's story, and I guess the point that I'm really wanting to be clear about, because I did see a couple of comments in the chat that was saying the panel members made the decision because there was a shortage of foster carers. In our story, we didn't say that. What we said was that they were aware of that context, and then in balancing things up, they decided for the time being staying at home was the best decision for them. So Michelle, thank you for your thanks for your comments. And you said you didn't like the fact that the panel's decision was based on foster care shortage. I would suggest that, as I say in our story, that wasn't what we were saying. What we were saying was it's part of the backdrop, it's part of the context, but panel members are still being asked to kind of exercise judgment and assessment based on all the evidence that's placed in front of them. What Michelle's going to say is hopefully the right support is put in place for both of them and they can move forward with their lives. I would say that's absolutely vital. And actually the final scene one of the final scenes of Billy's story, when you see them walking back into their house and the voiceover at that point is talking about, and this very much a theme of kind of ongoing challenges. So it's something, it's something for many young people. When decisions are made, it could be a children's panel, such as behind Billy's story, it might be a care review or kind of other such things. These decisions are big and are influential, but they won't instantly mark a change or a turnaround or a stopping point. That their story will continue, and sadly, in many cases, kind of a number of different challenges will be continuing and ongoing for them. And actually, so one of the other comments I pulled out, and this is completely coincidental because I see Julie Pritchard is here. So Julie, you put a comment saying that you were saying good morning, you were looking forward to the last live stream, and actually your comment was one of the ones that I pulled out in advance. So there's a nice bit of kind of serendipity there. And actually, so from reading your from reading your comment there, Julie, I see that you're actually a foster carer yourself. So kind of first and foremost, I'd always like to say kind of thanks for taking on that role. When I was mentioning earlier about the shortage of foster carers where I stay, and the fact that there's having to we're undertaking kind of quite a public campaign to try and recruit new foster carers. It's such a vital and important role. So kind of first and foremost, kind of thank you for taking on the role, and you comment on the. Now, you were also somebody who was a little bit more conflicted in terms of the information we've got about Billy. What's in his best interest at this point in time, and kind of seeing arguments kind of both ways. And in a sense, no, a course such as this gives us the luxury of being able to think about these things and have those discussions when it's not real life cases. Obviously, the complexity involved in the real world when we're dealing with cases such as Billy for real, and these real life-changing decisions being kind of part of what people are engaging in. And Billy's story was designed in a way to hopefully provoke some of these conflicting thoughts about kind of what might be the best way to go here, and it would be possible to argue it one way or the other, and part of my role here is not saying there was a right answer and a wrong answer. That's certainly not the case in Billy's story. What I'm saying, if there's anything right or wrong, what I would be saying is what is absolutely right is that the task for panel members in this sort of situation is to make what they think is going to be make decisions that are going to be in the best interest of the child. And as a symbol that, and that's what should be driving their thoughts. It shouldn't be resources. So, i.e., that issue of other foster carers available. The panel members are charged with what's going to be in the best interest of the child, and in some instances, if a certain decision is made by a children's hearing panel, then it might give the local authority a bit more power to their elbow in terms of kind of arguing for that resource, because it's now backed up by the decision of a children's hearing. So I was there 2 weeks ago in the live stream. I didn't really mention Billy's story, and I wanted to make sure that we spent more time on it today. Obviously, Billy's story, it's a fictional story, and Billy is not a real person in that sense. But the scenario and the types of issues that Billy and his family are contending with, I think are issues that are very real, certainly in a UK context for families up and down the country, and I would imagine beyond that. So there's a real relevance in thinking about these things. So kind of thank you to everyone who's kind of followed Billy's story, contributed in the polls, made comments throughout the 6 weeks. So thanks for that. So I'm just going to pause for a second and just take a drink of water. I think that's me good now. I could feel a wee tickle at the back of my throat. I've got two other main things I want to do before we finish up. We've got a couple of kind of more general questions, and then I want to talk about the polls. So actually, I'm going to take the first question. The first question I'm going to take is from Mary Fran. And Mary, you've made that in the live stream here. I could see it as soon as I logged in. And it's a question about the increase in numbers of children in care, and how those have been going up. And you know, there's a real interesting discussion to be had here in relation to your question, Mary, about kind of where the direction of travel we see. So and kind of seeing your question there, and I don't want to blind everybody with numbers in here, but any kind of cursory check, if you go into Google and just start looking at I'm very just about to answer. It's very much in a UK context, and again touching on that international element to our audience and our participants. So in a UK context, we are very much seeing the numbers of children in care go up. So in England, for instance, we have seen a 28% rise in the last decade. Okay, that's really significant numbers. And if we stick with that UK context, that so in a decade where we have experienced austerity, that name that's been given to budget cuts left, right, and centre. I don't want to go off in a political rant, but we have seen funding for councils and for local authorities cut in a way that they've never been cut before. And I'm not talking about the pandemic here. I'm talking about kind of an entire decade of cuts to services. And we've seen a number of services to individuals, to communities, to whole groups of people either be reduced or cease to be delivered completely. So we've got that going on, and then we've got, because Mary, your question is about kind of what do we think's behind this, and there can be various explanations, but certainly kind of one that is put forward quite regularly is that if we continually cut the resources offered to communities, to families, to individuals, it puts more people under strain. It puts more families in situations where there's more stress and less resilience to cope with that. More families struggle. More families kind of struggle to cope, and we end up with more children experiencing more loss, disadvantage, etc. And the net result being that more end up receiving services from the care system. And it's almost like the less we invest in society, and we see this playing out in lots of ways. Again, I'll just use a very UK English context, but we quite regularly see, and thankful. It's not to say that it's not happening. There's an interest about kind of when things make the news and make the media and when they don't. But with a depressing regularity, we see reports and incidents about knife crime and deaths in London, especially. And when we enter into a phase where we're seeing more of that in the media, part of the narrative is this is terrible, and there's something about the lawlessness of young people and blaming and other such things. But there's a whole other narrative which is about the defunding and stripping out of youth services that has been systematically happening for a decade now. And about as you begin to take out all those supports and youth services and the different roles and functions that they were providing, that eventually that starts to have an impact, because there's less of a support network. There's less of a kind of different pathways and different diversions for young people, and the potential for them to get kind of taken down a different path and caught up in different things. And it's impossible to divorce these sorts of statistical changes from this systematic defunding of a number of services that we've had. So Mary, part of my answer would be I think that's absolutely part of it. Now, there's a whole debate about are we more tuned into some things? Are we better at identifying children when they're in need of intervention and support? Arguably yes. And some things are perhaps more on the agenda. We'll get better systems, were more sophisticated in terms of kind of interagency working, although we've still got lots and lots of way to go to develop there. But we are seeing more in it. So it's almost a bit of a catch-22 situation. We've got more children coming into the care system, so we'll get more need than we've ever had at the same time that we're seeing resources curtailed. So there's a real kind of challenge for us. And in parallel to that, I want to pick up on another question, and this got posted on the page, and it brings, I think, that discussion much more up to date as well. And it came from Todd Ward. So thanks for posting your question. I'm fairly sure I picked up on a question from you in week 2 or week 4. So thanks for posting again and bringing this discussion very much into the kind of current context. Asks, what can be done to help with the poverty and devastation caused by COVID, and how much of the negative impact will it have on vulnerable children? Do you think many will have gone under the radar during these times? Undoubtedly, yes. I think we're already beginning to see more and more evidence that whilst the impact of COVID has been far-reaching, those most impacted on it most negatively are those that were most vulnerable to begin with, in a sense. So in many ways, the gaps in society between between those with resources and those with less resources has been amplified and magnified and exaggerated by the kind of current situation. And there's a real concern. I would use that phrase about going under the radar, because in terms of kind of thinking about vulnerable children and child protection and other such things, the fact that kind of parts of lockdown, and so in a UK context, we'll pretty much get schools up and running again now. But we had long periods of time where schools weren't open, and children and young people were having far less contact with other people, with other professionals, with other services. So if young people were already experiencing vulnerability, then they were kind of closed away and having less access or less contact with these services, and it kind of making them more vulnerable. And so in relation to your question then about kind of where do we go from here, I would hope that part of the response has got to be that there's got to be we've got to move beyond a recognition that we know how this is playing out to actually throw in some resources at the most vulnerable in society. And am I particularly hopeful about that? Well, again, in a UK context, if we just take one example, look at how the discussion about free school meals played out in the UK, and about it's still incredible to think that the way this played out in terms of part of the government response was, no, we're not going to keep free school meals going over the holiday period, when all the evidence is telling us that children and families that are in receipt of free school meals during school term times, that need for food doesn't go away during the holiday. And if we don't, and if we don't keep providing that service at this point in time, when many families are experiencing either furlough or unemployment, increased poverty, then it's simply going to mean children going hungry. And the only way that even got resolved in the UK was a young professional footballer literally taking on the government and almost shaming them into changing their policy. Now, if I take that as one example, kind of thinking back to your question about kind of what's going to shift things on, does that make me confident? Well, but in that instance, I think we, in some ways, we got to where we needed to get to, but it was disappointing, the process that we had to go through to get that, in terms of, was there a real political will to offer that level of support and investment, and recognise that this was an absolute need for many children and families up and down the country. So I think we've absolutely got to keep this on the agenda in terms of kind of trying to ensure that people who have been most disadvantaged and most placed in vulnerable positions by the current situation, the system has never been more under strain. And Julie, I see the comment you put in there. I do agree with that. I think social services are I think they always do the best that they can, but but I think we need more resources. And I guess what certainly in a UK context, what's been interesting over the last year, because part of the agenda of austerity was we can't afford this, we don't have enough money. And then actually, what's the last year demonstrated? Well, where there's a will, there's a way, because my goodness, I've found lots of money to throw at different things. So again, we're probably back to, well, what are your priorities in terms of what we're going to kind of throw, or going to put the money towards? And actually, speaking about kind of COVID and the pandemic and some of the things that are going on, I want to tie this into the last thing that I mentioned, but Mary, thanks for your question. Thanks for your question. We had a two-part poll, and we had the 10 scenarios, and we gave you information in week 5, and we said pick the 3 that caused you the most concern, and we gave you some more information about those scenarios, and we said, right, kind of how do your votes kind of change or not? And the results are all there on the page for you, so you can go and look at them, and you can see for some of the scenarios it's pretty much not changed at all. But there's a couple that's changed quite significantly. But there's one particular scenario that I really want to pick up on, and it's the second scenario. It's Jane and Jim, who are 7 and 5. And in week 1, you get some information about them, and they're in a household where domestic abuse is present. And at that point in week 1, 65% of you said that's in my top 3. So it was the third most selected scenario. Okay, so there was only 2 other scenarios that collected more votes. We move on to the next week, and you get a bit more information. And what you get told is that Jane and Jim themselves haven't been physically assaulted. They haven't been the subject of physical assault, but they've been present and they've witnessed their mum being assaulted. And something really interesting happens with the vote here, because we see it go from 65% down to 24%. And I'm just quickly looking up and down the numbers. It goes down to, it's only the 5th or the 6th most concerning scenario for you now, where previously it was the 3rd most concerning scenario. And where I would link that into the current situation with COVID just now is that a couple of things here. Kind of one, what do we know about domestic abuse? The impact for children of being in a household where domestic abuse is present, and especially where they're witnessing it and seeing it and hearing it and living it, and the physical and emotional impact that has on them in terms of their growth, their development, their emotional and physical security. The impact that has on children can be absolutely profound and damaging. They don't have to be the physical victim themselves, and that's it. And actually, even if they're not physically hit, in some ways they do, and they can become the physical victim, because the way some of these things play out in our body when we're exposed to trauma and terror, we know this physically does things to our body, and the impact this can have on, especially on young children who are still growing and developing. So there's something really significant here in terms of when we see the number come down. Now, part of the scenario says that you know that services or the authorities are aware of this, so perhaps some of you are picking that one less because you're thinking, right, it's still a dangerous, scary situation for them, but at least somebody knows about it, and something might happen. But to see it down at that percentage is kind of quite interesting in a sense. And I guess where I'm connecting this into COVID is we're getting more and more evidence now about how things that have happened as a result of COVID and lockdown. So again, I'm quoting statistics from England here, but and this was just in the press 3 days ago, and we're seeing calls to national domestic abuse helplines increase in England by over 60% in the last year, and just thinking about this in terms of in the case of kind of those 2 children, it's a fictional scenario, but in a household where domestic violence is present, and then put lockdown on top of that, where there is literally no escape, and just how big an issue this is, and it's always been an issue, and it's something that we need to pay more and more attention to. But the 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 one of the side effects of lockdown in terms of people being trapped in houses or in households where behaviour like this might be present and being kind of subject to that to that continually. So and again, it links back perhaps to the question that Em posted about the when we hope, well, as we begin to come through the other side of this, and hopefully we see a vaccination program begin to really kind of take hold and a more kind of systematic impact and allow kind of more freedom and movement again, in a sense. But how do we ensure that people that have experienced further trauma, isolation, poverty, vulnerability, the list goes on. How do we make sure that we don't leave them behind? And sorry, I was quoting your question. I've just seen you come up in the chat there. I hadn't actually spotted you were in the chat as well. So I'm glad that I've been able to respond to your question. Right, I'm aware I've kind of already run over time. And I want to kind of draw things to a close in terms of kind of this run of the programme. So first and foremost, thanks to everybody that's participated, especially those of you who've been active on the comments board, attending these sessions, contributing to the conversation. And actually say that this is the busiest chat we've had in one of these live sessions for a while. And it's great to see you kind of talking to each other and sharing these comments. And it's interesting, I'm seeing comments about affordable housing and how this all been kind of part of the discussion as well. And there's always an interesting element of caring for vulnerable children, because we focus on poverty quite a lot. And again, this run of it, that regularly seeing comments where people make comments about, actually, the thing that I'm finding most shocking in a UK context is the statistics round about poverty. For the sort of country that we think we are, in terms of the amount of children that we have living in poverty. Because this is a national disgrace, and this should be headline news every day, and the current situation has only exaggerated that and made that even worse for many people. So the link between a lot of what we've been talking about in poverty is clearly defined and very well established, and it's got to be part of the solution for us. So I'd really like to thank everybody that's been present in the comments, keeping the conversation going to today. There was a question earlier on, and I see Sarah had answered that, and it was about, because I had mentioned previously, but obviously this is a free online course. We do have a distance learning master's level program, so I realised that would maybe of interest to a smaller number of people that, for instance, have been participants in this, but we do have a number of people who, via this program, find out about our master's program and decide to follow through that. So we have a distance learning MSc in Child and Youth Care Studies, and it's completely online in the same way that this is. If that's something you would like to find out more information about, Sarah had put some details about it in the chat. Equally, if you go into the University of Strathclyde website, if you put my name in, or you put Child and Youth Care Studies, you'll quite quickly, even if you put that into Google, you'll quite quickly find the link to the page. You can get my email address from there. If you had any questions about it, feel free to drop me an email, and I would be happy to answer. You will retain a space on your registration on this run of Caring for Vulnerable Children runs for a little bit yet, so you can still go in and out of the material. You can keep the conversations going, so make use of the material for as long as you can access it. And I'm just going to finish with one other little bit of kind of significant news, which means a lot. It certainly means a lot to me and Sarah. This is actually the 15th run of Caring for Vulnerable Children. So we've been running this for a number of years now, and at some point over the last week or so, we notched up our 100,000th participant in the programme, and it's a bit like when you're driving your car and the mileometer it goes up to a number such as that, and so that feels a really significant number for us. Now, we don't know which one of you actually it was, or we would try and contact you and give you some sort of kind of free prize. But it's just great to be part of something that has been engaged with by so many people, and the different positive comments we get back. So I just like that feels like kind of quite a positive thing for us to be finishing on, the fact to kind of highlight that you are part of such a huge community of learners thinking about this really important topic. And I'd just like to finish by kind of saying to that, I think we've all got a task going forward, regardless of where we are and regardless of what our role or our position is, and just thinking about how can we contribute to the debate, to the effort, and for some of us, it's the roles and the jobs that we have. For others, it's less about paid roles, and it's more about kind of family roles, informal roles, volunteering, a whole range of kind of different things. And then for some of us, there's also perhaps a bit more kind of advocating and agitating and kind of whether it's a political with a small p or a big P, in terms of kind of trying to influence things moving forward. And yeah, I would just say all of you claim to be the 100,000th person, and that's probably the best way to deal with that. So good luck both with your learning going forward and all your other endeavours. Thank you very much for your involvement over the last 6 weeks, and look after yourself. Thanks very much.